If you are a complete newcomer to vertically scrolling bullet hell shooter games, I highly recommend that you check out the demo for Warding Witches. And if you are a longtime veteran of vertically scrolling bullet hell shooter games, I also highly recommend that you check out Warding Witches, the demo on Steam. And I'm sure that you're probably thinking, why is a video about a demo this long? But the answer is that I have already put 5 hours into this demo in the last 24 hours. And that's really saying something, considering that one run through of this demo that is about a stage and a half long takes 7.5 minutes. Suffice it to say, I find this game quite addicting, very fun, and I really like it. And so this video serves multiple purposes. One purpose is just to promote this game, to encourage other people to check it out, and the other purpose is directly to communicate with the developer Sonorode. Sonorode is a solo developer working on their first game. I got their blessing to make this video, and Sonorode seems pretty excited about getting feedback, so I'm trying to get it out as quickly as possible. So even though I still haven't beat this demo on the highest difficulty because I am by no means a shmup expert, I'm going to give my very detailed thoughts about this demo. I think I will be able to speak for both demographics that this game is aiming towards, both somewhat more hardcore shmup players, not because I necessarily am one yet, but because I watch a lot of videos by them, I communicate with them, I'm in the shmup community, so I understand the values of that community to some extent, but also I'm not that great at the genre, I'm relatively new to taking it seriously, and so I can communicate with the lower level players and their expectations for a game like this. But suffice it to say, my feelings on this game are positive. I will definitely buy it when it comes out. I've put more time into this game now than I have into a lot of games that I've paid money for on Steam, and this is a free demo that I'm talking about here. This video is going to be broken into 3 general sections. The first is just kind of a review that goes over the basics of what makes this game interesting. The second part will be praise for everything I love about the game. And then the third part will be critique for everything I think could be touched up or fixed. Some of it will be stuff that I think is just obvious little things that will just make the experience better, and I'll save the more debatable points for the back end, more opinionated stuff that may or may not need alteration. So to start with, what is Warding Witches? It is a bullet hell shoot 'em up game in the classic style of the 90s arcade tradition. So what makes it stand out? The first thing that caught my attention is, of course, the aesthetics. You play as one of 2 witch girls, Willa or Talia, and you're fighting like witchy enemies. You know, you're fighting skeletons and trees, you're flying through a forest, you're flying through a town somewhere in like a pre-modern Germanic area. This game is made by a German developer, and it is heavily Germanically themed, which I really appreciate because I don't know any other shmups that are themed this way. There are other games where you play as witches, but none of them are so heavily couched in the witch aesthetic, and also these witches are not anime girls, which is very different as well. This is not Cotton, this is not Marisa Kirisame from Toho. These are Western style witches. But beyond the aesthetics, what really surprised me is the unique gameplay. Because while the inclusion of multiple characters that each have their own shot type, one being more of a widespread firer and one being a more concentrated fire, where you can go between slow mode and regular pace, auto fire, those are normal things about the genre. But what's really interesting is that this game does not have bombs. Most shmups have a bomb you can use that will clear all of the bullets on the screen. Usually there's a limited number of them, and you collect more of them as incremental power-ups over the course of a run, and there's usually a very limited number of bombs. This game does not have bombs at all. What it instead has is a shielding mechanic, And the mechanic works a little bit differently between both of the characters. When you play as Willa, then within a little circular radius around you, when you use the shield, it just evaporates the bullets that are in that radius. But you can only use it a certain number of times or absorb a certain number of bullets before the shield breaks, and then you have a short time punishment before you can use it again. When you use the shield, any enemies that you destroy in the time that those bullets are disappearing will then drop extra points. And so if you're playing for score, using the shield frequently is a really good idea. Now, you can dodge all of the patterns in this game without ever using the shield. It is kind of a little bit of a get out of jail real quick. You know, it's similar, analogous, I guess, to death bombing in other games, except that it refills relatively quickly and you can use it quite a bit, which might make the game sound a little bit easy, and I'm sure that for some veteran players it might be, but when you account for how you use it in scoring, it actually becomes a very deep mechanic, because the amount of bullets that you negate and the number of enemies that you destroy during that negation period affect the point collection rate after you kill the enemies. And also, the more enemies you kill, you have a chaining mechanic that functions similarly to like Dodonpachi or Blue Revolver, where the more enemies you kill, the more this meter fills up that makes it so you get even more points when you use your slowdown shield destruction technique. And so you have to be somewhat careful about using the shield, because if you're doing it too abundantly, then you might run out of shield when you really need it, but you also need to use it frequently if you want to collect more points. And things get even deeper when we talk about Talia's shield system, because instead of evaporating the bullets, she actually just makes them slower. And so when she uses her shield, whatever bullets are in the area of effect become permanently slower, but they don't disappear unless you destroy an enemy after freezing the bullets. And if you do that, those bullets will turn into more point medals. So you kind of have a dynamic where Willa is more so the survival character and Talia is more so the score character, and she's a little bit more technical to use because Willa has a wider bullet spread when she's in unfocused mode, and when she's in focus mode she has a very tight bullet spread, which makes it so that you can deal with all situations of enemies pretty effectively while also defending yourself very easily because you're just vanishing bullets. But however, you don't gain as many points as you do if you are using Talia effectively to slow down bullets, destroy enemies at the right rate, and gain all those extra medals. But however, dodging those slow bullets is still a challenge. They're not gone. They're only a little bit slower, and when the screen really gets full of bullets, tracking the ones that you have slowed down versus the ones that are still moving quickly becomes a way bigger challenge than if you were just doing one or the other thing. But this also isn't to say that using Willa is like totally untechnical, because when she's using auto fire, she only fires very wide with no bullets firing in the middle of her pattern. So you always have to have enemies at a concentrated angle if you want to stay moving faster, and she's a slower mover in general, so if you're really concerned about movement speed, you probably won't want to play with her at all. But if you're more worried about clearing enemies off the screen, then she has a wider range and more ability to do that. So she's generally less movement focused and more capable of dealing with everything that's going on in the game. Whereas if you prefer to move around a lot, which I do, then I immediately gravitated towards playing Talia. Even though she's a little bit more technical, I liked playing with her more, and because she can score higher, I also found myself choosing her for score potential as well. But this isn't to say that you can't get a pretty high score with Willa. I think you really just have to be a bit more complete in destroying the enemies. Because even though with Talia you can turn bullets into points, those points immediately fall through the screen. And so if you have to dodge out of the way of another wave of unfrozen bullets really quickly and you miss that extra score, then it might be that you end up both not picking up that score and not destroying as many enemies. Whereas with Willa, it's a lot easier to concentrate on destroying enemies and keeping your score potential higher. You still score by deleting bullets and destroying enemies, you just don't score as much, assuming that you actually collect all of the score with Talia. So there is a bit of push and pull. I think if you pushed both of these characters to the limits, you could get very high scores with both characters. It's just that, at the end of the day, the really high level players are going to be using Talia more. Now that's all what makes it interesting at like a bit more of a high level shmup player. But let's say that you're a total noob and you're just worried about, can I beat this game? What's interesting about this game is that it really has 6 different difficulty levels, and depending on how you look at it, you could say it has 12 difficulty levels, because if you're just playing for survival, playing as Willa is easier than playing as Talia, because you're just negating bullets, you don't have to dodge them after slowing them down. That said, having a higher score can lead you to being able to gain more lives at the end of each level, because after you beat a level, your score gets tallied up, and there's a certain number of points it takes to basically fill up this medallion, and however many medallions you collect at the end of the stage, you get to put into powering up your character. And so if you are playing purely for survival, at the end of the stage, you can choose between either powering up your shot type, powering up your number of options, which are the little things that float alongside you and fire additional bullets or lasers. You can power up your shield so that it lasts even longer and can take more bullets, or you can just straight up give yourself extra lives. And so, to an extent, there are score-based life extends, but only at the end of the level, and only if you choose to purchase them instead of powering up your character in some other way, which is really interesting because most shmups don't make you choose between different types of power-ups like this, and especially not between life extends and power-ups to your strength. So with this game, if you're a very high-level player who never needs extra lives because you never die, you can put more of those points into shield, because shield is how you get more score. And so for a high level score player, you'll just keep leveling up shield to maximum. But also this game has penalties to your score for your build. So the more points you put into improving your build, you actually get a score reduction. So at that point, you would have to make sure that the extra points you're gaining through shield exceed the amount that you lose through having upgraded the shield. The only upgrade that doesn't affect your point score, seemingly, is the health power-ups, although I'm not sure if that'll be true in the final game. Beyond the differences in characters and how you use them, though, there are literally 3 difficulty levels, which are essentially easy, normal, and hard. But there's also 2 different modes of gameplay, which are arcade and story mode. Arcade mode has no dialogue in it, it's just play the game straightforwardly. If you game over, you have to start over, and you only are able to upgrade your character at the end of stages in the way that I've described already. But in story mode, you also have easy, medium, and hard, but there is dialogue over the course of the level, and more importantly, every time you game over, the points you have are tallied up, and you can buy upgrades before you try again. This is a really big deal in making concessions towards modern gamers who are more concerned with just getting to the end of a game and not feeling like they have to start over and lose all of their progress. I would actually describe this as basically progression mode. And I don't think any high-level shmup player is going to bother with this at all. If you are somebody who plays these games regularly, you will likely go straight to arcade mode, straight to the highest difficulty, and just play until you beat it. If you were to go to story mode just to consume the story, and you are that good, you probably won't even notice the ability to upgrade yourself after using a continue, because you won't have to use a continue. But if you are a newer player and you want the game to rise to your level of challenge, but without feeling like you lose all progress every time you game over, you can progress. You can kind of level up. And it doesn't just instantly make the game easy. If you don't even make it to the mid-boss of the first level, you're not going to gain enough points to actually level anything up. But you keep those points when you go back through the cycle. So if you were to, say, die before the first boss twice, you might get enough points to put one into shot or one into shield or whatever it is you think you need more of. Give yourself an extra life. And then every time you get a little further, you'll incrementally gain more points. And it's very possible that you will end up fully upgraded before you even beat the first stage if you're doing really poorly. When I played Cursed Difficulty, which is basically hard mode, on story mode for the first time, I found myself with a very highly powered character by the time I made it through the whole demo. And so in total, that probably represented like half an hour of playtime of me getting through this hard version of story mode. But I then put hours into trying to beat Cursed mode on arcade difficulty and still haven't actually completed it yet. So suffice it to say that beating Cursed mode on story is pretty much training wheels for beating Cursed mode on arcade. And of course, both of these things will be substantially more challenging once this is a full game with 5 stages and not just a stage and a half. So if your goal was to make it to the end of the game, see the whole story, see all the stages, and never feel like you're losing progress when you game over, you could play this on beginner story mode and get through the game with relative ease. And that will be enough for you to decide if you want to kick it up to the more advanced difficulties or not. I think the appeal of this style of game is playing it over and over and over again and getting better and learning the routing, learning what you could have done that would have let you live longer. I think a lot of people are under the impression that these games are just like Twitch reflex games, and more often than not, they're more about carefully planning your way through the stage, using your resources at the right moments. Again, if you're playing as Willa, you can literally negate bullets as they're approaching you. So it never necessarily requires you to dodge all the bullets as much as it requires you to time your negation of bullets just right and not use too much of it before you need to. In that way, this game has one of the most controllable difficulty curves I have ever seen in a shooter game. Wherever you're at, it will rise to your level, it will give you a satisfying experience, and it will give you reason to continue playing to higher levels. If you beat all 3 levels of story mode, then you move up to arcade mode, and once you get to a point where you can actually beat arcade mode on the highest difficulty, you still have scoring to take you even further. This game invites you to the depth that is natural to the shmup genre. It does not require you to already understand it, to already have that natural drive. It teaches you how to acclimate yourself into this style of a game, which I think makes it very powerful for newcomers without being something that veterans would turn their nose up at and have no reason to play. So those are the broad strokes of this game and why I feel so adamant about recommending that you check out this demo, that you wishlist it, no matter how into this genre you are. I think it is just a good game worth playing. Now, having said that, this is a demo for a game that does not have a release date set. It is by no means a complete game. I would actually describe this more like an early access demo. It exists more so to test the waters, see how people feel about it, get feedback, and the game is heavily being worked on by developer Sonorode. And so as I go through talking about it in depth, I'm going to talk about every little thing that I like about this game, what I think gives it its identity beyond just the mechanics as I've already described them, and then I'm going to get into very seriously nitpicky critique. And my intention is not to suggest that any of this makes the game bad. Clearly I love the game. I want to see it perfected, and the reason I feel that way is I can see pouring hundreds of hours into this game. I can see people who really love this game, who want to maximize the potential out of it, playing it for years and years to come. When it comes to the shmup scene, if a shmup game is good, it will live forever. And I know Sonorode understands and appreciates this because based on their social media posts, their presence in the shmup Discord, they really know shmups, they really care about shmups. I am certain Sonorode has played way more shmups than I have at a way higher level. So this is not me talking from the perspective of I know shmups better than you or anything like that. This is more like, here are little quality of life adjustments. Maybe some of them you already know and are already planning to fix, but I just want to make sure that everything that could be explored is explored. For instance, I already had a conversation with Sonorode who told me, if you know any quick, easy wins, just let me know right away. And I said, well, one thing is the leaderboard scrolling, because when the game came out, it did not have scrolling on the leaderboard. And so Sonorode added that feature. But at the time, there weren't more than 10 people who were on the leaderboard. And so at present, when you scroll through the leaderboard, you have to do it one name at a time, and it takes forever to get through the 330 people that are currently listed there. However, I said, what if you made it page by page? And Sonorode said, that's a good idea. So, very open to corrections and minor things. And so I need to emphasize, I'm not saying you should take every piece of advice I have here. Obviously, as the creator of the game, Sonorode has their own opinions, and I'm not trying to infringe on any of that. But these are just my opinions, my takes, things I like, things I don't, and I'm going to get really granular about it in the effort of trying to see this game rise to its entirely full potential. So to start with the really great stuff, I love the whole aesthetic of the game. The music is addicting, easy to listen to. Sonorode is first and foremost a games composer. Like, beyond making this game, they have already been an EDM musician, already made music for other indie games, and so it is natural that the music has a lot of confidence to it. My favorite song in the game is actually the "Thank You for Playing" tune. Every time you get a game over or you complete the game, you get taken to this screen that's like, thanks for playing, talk about my game or whatever. And that screen has this really nice tune that is memorable and catchy within a couple of seconds. Like, it is a music theory miracle. And yeah, I think the game overall has really solid music. It reminds me of two other games that I really love, which are Blue Revolver and Mushihime-sama. Blue Revolver also has a very addicting EDM soundtrack, and the game overall feels a lot like Mushihime-sama. The way that movement feels, the way that enemy placement and bullet patterns feel, I think that's the game it's probably drawing from the most. It's hard for me to say. Sonorode called this a love letter to cave shooters. Cave made Mushihime-sama, Dodonpachi, and about 30 other amazing shmups, and it's clear that Sonorode has played a lot of them. So if this game is borrowing mechanics from games I haven't played yet, I would not be at all surprised. But for me, as a relative newcomer to shmups, the biggest, most obvious influence is Mushihime-sama. Blue Revolver is maybe an influence. There are certain things about the pacing of the game that really remind me of Blue Revolver. And of course, a little bit of Toho, because you got cute girls instead of spaceships as your controller characters. I have no idea how Sonorode feels about Toho, but I would be shocked if it wasn't potentially an influence. Right off the bat, starting up the game, I adore the menu aesthetics. I think the little spinning pentagram is really cute and looks great. I love the layout of it, the look of it, the way it feels. Everything about the menu is really solid. It is maybe slightly goofy that the title of the game appears both at the top of the menu screen and to the left of it on the overlay part of the screen, but that's only a problem that you face if you're playing with a normal screen setup, not on a vertical screen setup, I assume. But I don't know how many people who play this will actually have a vertical screen setup unless they are a pretty hardcore shmup player or just have that incidentally. But I do like the overlay as well. I think it has a nice design. I like that the character is always there on the side. I like that it shows you what you're doing on the controller in the bottom right. It's just overall a nice looking aesthetic for the menus and everything. I will say at present, it does not change what character is on the overlay depending on which one you pick. It only ever shows Willa, although if you look at it in the Steam trailer, it actually shows that it switches overlay based on the character. So I assume this is either something that's already been changed in a more modern build of the game or will be coming eventually. There is a new build of this demo that will come out in anticipation of an upcoming event, and so I will expect that things will change about this game pretty quickly. So some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in this video might literally change before you even ever play this demo. And I fully intend to cover this game more than once, especially when the full game is out, so I will kind of chart its progress. Don't think of this as like a critique of a complete game. This is suggestions to a developer about a game in development. I really like the character sprites in this game. I like that the two characters are pretty distinct from one another, and I also appreciate how much booty they have. I didn't even notice it at first. I was like a few hours in before I really zeroed in on the sprites, and I was like, damn, they're both carrying, and like when you turn to the left, they kind of show a little bit of thick thigh. It's different, you know, because so many shmups are about these little anime girls, and so there's something refreshing about seeing like full-bodied German witch girls, you know, piloting their brooms around. It's a tasteful level of sex appeal that I think could be appreciated by people of any gender. The bullets look great, I enjoy the patterns, I like the enemy placements, I like the enemy designs, I really love Talia's little sprite face that's used for her live counter. All in all, the game feels pretty similar to a game like a Mushihime-sama or a Blue Revolver. So that is a high compliment. I like the way the leaderboards look. I like the way that the options screen is handled. And that's all pretty broad general praise of the game. So now I'm going to nitpick every little detail of criticism I have. Let's really get into it. So the first issue I know has already been brought to the devs' attention because it was on the Steam boards, which is that the controller mapping doesn't completely work. And I know Sonorode is aware of the fact that it doesn't tell you that you've picked whatever button you've picked when you select a button for each command, but beyond that, it also just doesn't accept the triggers or the bumpers as options for some reason. Like, you can pick any of the 4 face buttons to do the 3 things that you need in the game, but I personally would prefer to put my auto fire on the right trigger, which is how I have it in Blue Revolver, because I can just keep my finger there, and it's a lot easier to then initiate slow mode or to initiate shield mode if I can still keep my finger on auto while doing it. Like, basically never have to take my finger off the auto fire if I don't want to. When it comes to the sound options, there is some inconsistency in the volumes of different songs and sound effects in the game. I pretty quickly turned down the sound effect volume to like half, and still it felt like there were a couple of sound effects that are just way louder than the others. Particularly when the shield breaks, that sound effect is really loud. And the sound effect when you die is terrifying. And I got used to it. Like, after hearing it enough times, it stopped sending a shiver through my spine. But the first few times I heard it, I was like, Jesus Christ, that is such a scary sound. I don't know if I hate that. I feel like it is properly, like, punishing. Like, when you die, you feel, like, afraid. And I think that's kind of a neat effect it had psychologically, but it definitely took some getting used to. The first, like, 10 or so times I died, I was quite frazzled by that sound. The one song that I mentioned being my favorite earlier that plays when you've beat around just seems to be like twice the volume of the regular in-game music. There's also just not a ton of sound effects in the game, and I don't necessarily hate that. It can be aggravating in some games when there's too many sound effects, but maybe just a little extra oomph when an enemy is destroyed or something, just more sound cues that kind of let you know that things are happening. I don't need a pew 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 coming from my character, but a little bit more feedback from the enemy side might be nice. Now, the character select screen I find pretty interesting because I really like the way that it presents the, wide shot, medium speed shield in almost like a Persona 5 kind of menu look. But there is so much going on typographically on this screen. I had not even noticed that it says the names of the characters up closer to their heads because that doesn't stand out very much. You've got the very obvious Persona 5 layout, but then the standard text style below that, and then also the green player 1 locked in and press start for player 2. It just feels a bit busy, considering how much space there is between the player avatar and the name, and then how close the details of what they do are to the text box. Maybe everything in the middle could just be raised up a little bit. Like if you just took everything above the text box, including the character portrait, and moved it up just a bit, I think it would be a little bit better because the two text styles coming so close to each other just feels odd. That is an extreme nitpick from me as somebody who took a typography class once. Getting into the levels themselves, aesthetically, I think the backgrounds are a little bit boring. I like that they are somewhat unique in terms of what they are presenting for a shmup game, but they're kind of flat. There's not a lot going on. And this is the kind of thing that I feel like maybe it would just be out of the grasp of the developer to do something about this right now. I mean, it seems like a lot of effort to put a lot of work into the background art, especially if that's not your first concern. This is a game I can so easily imagine getting a similar treatment to Blue Revolver, of having an original release and then maybe years later a more pumped up, visually stimulating version. And even that game, I would criticize the aesthetics as compared to a full-fledged developer shmup. This is a first-time creator solo dev, so I'm not really expecting much more. I'm just saying that obviously it could be more, and that's something that would make it maybe more enticing, especially as a game that you might play for 20 more years. But I don't think it's anything that needs to be corrected anytime soon. This is just a very minor thing I'm saying. A more major deal is that as much as I really adore Talia's face in that little icon, the fact that it is so big on screen means that once you get 4 lives, if you're playing on story mode, it kind of starts blocking out the enemies and making them harder to see. And I don't hate seeing the icon large, but over on the left side of the screen in the extend area, you've got a really tiny icon and a ton of space for it to be larger. So I think maybe put the really big version of the extend icon over on the left side of the screen, and then that tinier version on the actual screen. Because I see the value in putting how many lives you have directly on the screen, especially if you're playing this in a vertical screen mode where maybe it doesn't have all the side information. But I think it just takes up a little bit too much space on the screen when you end up with 4 extends. Also, I'm looking at where I have the video paused, and on the extend screen, there is one Willa face and one Talia face. I don't know how that glitch happened or how common that is. I never noticed it until just now, looking at my footage of the game. Yeah, I'm only seeing it happen once, so I don't know what caused that. Seems like a very random bug. I meant to mention when talking about aesthetics, I love how the options look. I love how the medals look. The way that spinning objects are designed is just very nice. Obviously, the end screen art for each level will be finished at a later point, or actually, the artwork itself does appear to be finished because it looks like it's the same art as what's over on the right. It just, the finished art hasn't been put into the game yet as of this demo, but I'm sure that'll be corrected before long. Now, this is one of my more serious criticisms for story mode, and another thing that maybe is already supposed to be fixed, but is that the dialogue cuts in very suddenly, where you have control of the character for a second, and then suddenly the dialogue box pops up and it just kind of drags you out of the action, and then you get put right back in after you finish the dialogue boxes. And when you get towards the end of stage 2, right before the mid-boss, this can actually happen while there are still enemies firing at you on screen. If you don't clear all the enemies before the mid-boss shows up, then you can be in the middle of a bullet pattern and suddenly the dialogue box comes up, which did happen to me the first time I played through. I think that if it was timed more like how in Toho games you have like a moment that kind of signals to you that it's coming, and then the character appears from off screen, like they usually kind of have a swoop in of the sprite. I don't really know how that's done, but it doesn't seem that complicated, and I think it does a lot to improve the dramatic timing of a cutscene ramping up. As it stands, the characters kind of flash in, and it's just a little bit awkward because it's like you get to stage 2, you see the word village pop up and fade away, and it feels like the stage is starting, and then the characters start talking. So it might make a big difference even to just have the dialogue before the stage actually begins. And there's also, the dialogue is somewhat awkward because the characters never feel like they're talking to each other, but sort of past each other. Like both characters are always talking as if they're both in the scene, but each one will kind of say what they are thinking without really responding to the other one. So for instance, at the start of the village stage, Talia says, "The village has fallen, there may still be survivors." And then Willa says, those are the villagers." It feels like she's having that reaction to herself, whereas I think if you phrased it, those ... those are, all caps, the villagers, then it sounds like she's responding to Talia. If the phrasing was, "The village has fallen, but maybe some of the villagers have survived," and then Willa says, "I think those are the villagers," then it sounds like they're talking to one another as opposed to past one another. Now, I don't think it's entirely a problem to have them feel a little stilted. The dialogue in Toho is very stilted, where characters are deliberately talking past each other. Could be that that's more of what you're going for. But it just feels more like somewhat awkward writing that can just easily be punched up a little bit. I don't think you need to change what they're saying, like in terms of the meaning of what's being said. Just the way that they're saying it so that it sounds like one is in reaction to the other a little bit more, like I described. That's a personal preference, though. That's not something I think is a necessity to change or that would bother a lot of people. It's just my notes as a writer. It's a much bigger deal that the dialogue feels like it just starts up while you're in the middle of playing the game, particularly right before the stage 2 sub-boss. I also think the graphical presentation in the second stage is just a little bit more boring. The zombie villagers are not as interesting of enemies as some of the ones from the first stage in terms of their appearance. It took me a second to tell that the smoke plumes coming out of the houses were smoke plumes because there's only so little ember there. Just maybe putting more fire and less density of smoke might make that look a little bit better. Again, incredibly minor aesthetic notes. I'm just thinking about what could be perfected. I don't think these are top priority concerns. And it's possible that the villagers are supposed to have some kind of animation. Maybe they'll be walking forward later so that they look a little bit more zombie-like. I think that would be cool. That would probably be enough, just like a 2-frame animation of them coming towards you. I know that the stage 1 mid-boss has placeholder text that's like, put an animation here. So there's definitely places where there's already intentions to graphically enhance this a bit. So I'm not going to assume that the dev didn't think of any of this. I'm just saying what I think could be done with this build of the demo, which again, I'll be notating changes in future videos. While I'm talking about like minor technical stuff that involves the text, the tutorial. In the tutorial, the text kind of types itself past the frame of the dialogue box and then corrects itself to go to the next line, as opposed to like the next word just appearing in the next line naturally. That feels kind of awkward and cheap, and particularly if you're just starting up the game for the first time, it's going to make the game feel lower budget, which it is obviously, but it's just going to make it feel a little bit less considered if that's one of the first things you see. When you actually play the game, it feels very deeply considered, and I could tell that gameplay was the first focus, which I very much appreciate. But these little aesthetic details can definitely make players turned off of something if they think that it feels cheap or incomplete. So just making the text wrap more natural. There's also a part where the text goes out of the dialogue box through the bottom during the tutorial. So that's an easy fix, probably, I hope. I don't know coding, so it's hard for me to say. A much bigger complaint I have about the tutorial is that you have to hold the start button to skip the tutorial, and you have to do that every single time you start up a new game, regardless of difficulty. I don't think anybody playing on the hardest difficulty needs the tutorial at all. I think you could just completely remove that. Pretty much just leave the tutorial for easy mode, maybe normal mode, maybe even all of the story mode levels, but I can't really imagine that anybody who picks cursed mode is going to need the tutorial at all. I would much prefer if it was not included or was a quicker skip, just because, as I'm also going to detail now, it takes a little too long to get back into the game after getting a game over, especially on this demo build where you have the whole screen that invites you to check it out on Steam, and on that screen it takes a couple of seconds before you can press a button to continue past that screen. And I understand doing that for the sake of a first-time completion or a first-time game over, but I've seen that screen a couple dozen times now, and I love the music on that screen, but it's just a matter of, if I die early into stage 1, I'm very likely to instantly hit restart. Just hit start, hit restart, go back right into the game, and that feels very satisfying. But if I get a game over, then I have to wait through a pretty lengthy game over screen, then I have to type in my name, then I have to watch the thank you for playing the demo screen, and then I have to click back through the menu, multiple screens, and skip the tutorial. And all of that just takes so long to get me back into the action when I'm raring to go. If it was just the kind of long game over screen and then all the menu screens, maybe that would be fine, but having to do so many screens before getting back into the action did start to aggravate me a little bit. Another minor note: when you hit start and you click either retry or return to menu, your cursor position is remembered by the game. And so I had times where I returned to menu, went back into the game, and then I intended to just restart the stage, and I accidentally exited myself back to the menu again, because when I'm in the mode of just restarting stages, I'm doing it super quick. I'm hitting start A, and so doing that, not realizing I'm still set to exit to menu, I actually made the mistake twice in a row one time, and that was pretty frustrating. Another very minor aesthetic note about the menus: when you're on the difficulty select, the text comes a little too close to the borders of the screen. This is another typography, minor complaint, where just if you shrank all three of the words for the difficulty levels just a bit so that it's a little more in the middle and not so close to the edges, I just think it would look better. This is like the easiest fix in the world, just changing the values so that they're all a little smaller. It's another personal thing. Maybe you won't feel the same way. I just think it would look better. I think I've pretty much gone through all of my minor aesthetic quick fix ideas and broader, super long term, maybe this isn't really something that needs to be thought about problems. But now I'm going to bring up a couple of things that are real game design quandaries that are much more arguable points, where I'm not sure if I'm right, but this is what I think after playing 5 hours of a 7-minute demo. One thing is, in the first stage, the second half doesn't feel harder than the first half, and in fact, the first half kind of feels harder. I am pretty sure I lost more lives on the first half of stage 1 than the second half, and I'm not completely sure why. The second half, it really feels sort of like a retread of the first half. It feels like you've got this gradual ramp up in enemy type and bullet density, and the second half has a few more enemies, but they're not necessarily harder to kill. And it's possible that part of this is because I mostly played with Talia. I think maybe it's possible that the first half of the stage is easier with Willa, and the second half is harder with Willa. I'm not entirely sure because I didn't play her as many times, but after so many rounds, I kind of felt like I was really struggling more to survive with all of my lives to the first mid-boss, whereas I was not having nearly as much trouble making it to the stage boss. It's not even a huge difference, but I feel like it should be a bigger difference leaning towards the second half being harder as opposed to the first half being harder. I don't know how easy that would be to change, and it's not a huge deal. Like, I didn't think it made it unfun. It just felt a little strange that the second half of the stage did not feel like it offered more of a challenge than the first half, really. And another big one with stage 1, and it took me a while to figure out why this was the case, is the amount of downtime after you beat the mid-boss. And what I realized eventually, I had a run where I'm playing as Willa, and because of her shot type being so wide, if you sit right in front of the boss and you're just firing at him and dodging his pattern, you won't really be hitting him. Like, you need to use focus mode to really hit the boss while dodging his first pattern. And so since I was firing wide, the fight took a lot longer than it normally would for me. This is like 4.5 hours into me playing this game. And you know, I had like my slowest round with him, and he died right as the next wave of enemies was entering the screen. And I literally went, oh, that's why I'm used to there being so much downtime. Because if you take forever to fight this boss, he will actually just fly away unbeaten, similarly to like some of the mid-bosses from Dodonpachi. So every other time I had fought him, I had killed him so quickly that you have to watch a rather lengthy death animation for the boss. And then there's a sort of speed up in the screen scrolling where like it sends you to the place you would naturally be if the boss had run away. And then you also have to wait for the enemies to show up. And all told, for me, this was usually like 8 to 10 seconds, which feels like a lot considering I'm only like 1.5 minutes into the game. It just felt like this is more breathing room than I need this early on. And, you know, for a while I thought it was just intentional breathing room. Like, I didn't realize that the boss could take so long to beat that the enemies would just show up right afterwards and it would feel more natural. But, you know, run after run after run, I would get to this part and be like, damn, it really slows down here. And there's kind of moments like this in, say, Blue Revolver, where I've heard the Blue Revolver developer talk about like how downtime is important, and a lot of people would disagree. You know, Mark from Electric Underground really hates downtime, really campaigns against it. I think there's one moment it works beautifully in Blue Revolver, which is in stage 3 at the midpoint when the music picks up right before you break the canister to get your extra points and then you fly on. Like, that's a really cool moment, and stuff like that can work. But there are also moments in Blue Revolver where the downtime is so that you will take longer to kill enemies on purpose. Like, there are moments where it's challenging you to leave the enemies alive on screen for longer so that you can continue your chain, and if you kill them too fast, you end up just kind of sitting around waiting and your chain diminishes. Which is still, I don't know, I feel two ways about that, you know, because it can be unfun if you kill the enemies too quickly, but it's also challenging you deliberately to do something different. In the case of this boss, there's no benefit to leaving it alive longer, as far as I can tell. So the fact that if I kill him faster, I feel like I get punished with more wait time. And the first boss, mid-boss in Blue Revolver, like, you destroy it and then instantly waves and waves of enemies come flying at you. It's a very memorable, keeping you on your toes moment, and it makes sense because you're only a minute into the game at that point. So I think this could use something like that. Like, I think it would feel nice if, as soon as I kill that mid-boss, I get swarmed by a bunch of, you know, kind of easy-to-kill enemies, but maybe have that same effect where if you keep a few of them alive, you continue your chain more. Like, I don't know. That downtime just felt unnecessary, and most of my runs, sometimes I appreciate the getting to touch my face time, but I can also get that in between runs. So, yeah, it was a very long gap for me on most of my runs, and that bothered me. Maybe it won't bother everybody, but I think that for the really high level players who are going to be running this again and again and again and again and again, that little bit of downtime might be a full bore killer for their willingness to keep playing. One more little thing I'll mention is that when you do restart a run, the music restarts, And I think it would be cool if that didn't happen. If you just hit restart and the music keeps playing, like you feel the sense of repetition more when you start over and the music starts over. I don't know how viable this is considering the way that the music factors into the stage. Like, I don't know if the stage is really timed around the music and so it has to be done at a certain pace. But when I'm retrying over and over again, because I keep dying early on trying to do point stuff, you know, like the more daring you get with the points, the more likely you are to die really early trying to do something silly. And so when I'm restarting again and again and the music starts over again and again, it feels a little bit more like I'm doing what I just did as opposed to continuing to do what I'm already doing. So I think that would be nice. Specifically in story mode, when you hit retry, you retry from 0. And I don't know if a lot of the newbie players who story mode is really for would understand that, like that you lose all your upgrades, because if I get to, let's say I've died on stage 1 and had to continue a few times and I've really upgraded my character, and then I die early into the stage and I decide to restart, I'm actually full restarting. And I think it would be cool if there was a restart stage button only on story mode, because it already is a big concession to newcomers anyways, so it might as well be all the way. I definitely think there are players who will accidentally hit retry, lose their progress, and be upset that they lost their progress. So I think that would be just a simple extra concession for those players. One more note I have to make is about slowdown. The dev already said that they might include an option to disable slowdown. I think that would be very welcome. I think that the slowdown actually takes some getting used to, because it kind of comes and goes inconsistently, and if you're not anticipating the change in the bullet speed, or you're not used to it going at the other speed, it doesn't automatically make it easier. There are times where I would rather just dodge the bullets at a faster clip than have to kind of wait for them, especially when you are manipulating time, and so you're making certain bullets slower than other ones. Keeping track of that on top of the slowdown can be a little bit of an extra challenge. So even though I think sometimes it makes it easier, and once I got used to it, it definitely made certain patterns easier, I don't think it's strictly necessary. And if you're playing this on the highest difficulty, probably you're looking for more of a challenge and you would not prefer the slowdown. So I think absolutely an option to disable it would be welcome. I don't think it's strictly necessary. I don't think it makes the game like more fun when it slows down. So yeah, I would say at the very least an option to disable it would be welcome. Maybe don't even include it on the highest difficulty. And I think that's it. I think that's all of my minor nitpicky complaints. Hopefully are mostly pretty easy to fix or ignore. But yeah, I think this game is really good. Again, I've spent an absurd amount of time playing this 7-minute demo, considering that it is a 7-minute demo. But it spoke to me with the witchy aesthetic, being that I am a self-identified internet witch. It spoke to me in being a cutesy shmup, which is my favorite kind of shmup, but also being hardcore and intense, but also having enough onboarding that I could easily recommend it to somebody who doesn't want to play a super hardcore game, I think, and I can also recommend it to people who do want to play a super hardcore game. So yeah, I think you've done something pretty brilliant here with the way that progression is handled, the trade-offs that you have to make between, like, am I going to get more lives or am I going to get more shot power, the punishments for choosing shot power, the different ways that the characters play. All of that stuff is really brilliant. Overall, I love the aesthetic. Even if I think the backgrounds could be more detailed, I don't dislike them. I love the color choices. I love the character sprites. There is so much to like about this game that I can easily see coming back to it, easily see recommending it. You know, I've been, for the last few weeks, pouring time into Blue Revolver. I think I'm up to like 15 hours in that game, and I haven't beat stage 4 yet. So this is a game that I'm imagining myself in that scenario of I'm reloading this and playing it for hours across weeks, and that's why if it made all of the quality of life adjustments to just be that pristine, perfect jewel of a product, I know I won't be the only one. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much to Sonorode for designing this game. I really hope it succeeds. I hope that the shmup community takes to it, that you continue to get more feedback from maybe higher level players than myself. I can tell you're really dedicated to making this thing the best you can, and I really appreciate that a developer is so interested in feedback, not just welcoming, but like excited about it. You know, there are some developers who feel really reticent, like when they get feedback, they feel attacked, and you seemed like you were actively excited at the opportunity to fix your game that is already great. So, you know, I love the attitude, and I love the game. And to everybody else who's listening, thank you for making it so deep into a long dissection of a demo for a shooter game. But this is the first of what I hope will be a series of me doing videos like this. I really want to investigate demos and talk about them in depth. I probably won't go this far in depth if I don't think the dev is listening, but since I knew Sonorode would hear what I had to say, I figured I'd cross every T and dot every I. Alright, you've heard enough of me. I'm Trixie the Golden Witch. Links to everything I do are in the description. I've got 10,000 videos literally across 25 channels plus and counting, so, you know, you can always find me. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Shmups will never die.